Well, good morning, Mike.
Hey, how's it
It's
going?
going fantastic.
Good.
So it's the new year, and I was thinking about some things on New Year resolutions. My family, we're setting goals and we're doing all that. And what I notice is one of the things I have no problem setting goals. Like I can say that's my goal, and I work backwards. And a lot of times um, it looks like a totally awesome plan, but then something starts to go wrong, and it doesn't just stop me for that one goal, it seems to stop everything else too.
Yeah.
And working with you in the past, I know that when things go wrong, uh, you know, developers, we get stuck in our own minds, and sometimes we just start looping. And sometimes it takes a nice swift kick to get us out of that. And I was just wanting to talk to you about some of the things you've noticed from others, the things that you do to help keep progression happening, even when things stop moving forward in one area or another.
Hmm. Well, that's a good question. Um, I'm just trying to think of some examples that this may have occurred. Um, Honestly, to me, it's obviously when from a development standpoint and being a product manager, looking it, when there's ever an issue, it's ideally you've already created a plan, you know, uh, like a document, a requirements document, and the whole purpose and everything. And so for me, I always just go back and review that, um, and then just iterate, right? I mean, one of the things that I have no problem doing is just spontaneously changing direction,
Huh.
um, and just being flexible. As long as you're progressing forward and you're going to meet your goal, I don't think there's anything wrong with just pausing and doing a quick recalibration and then just keep moving forward progress. And even if it's I think even if you're not sure what the outcome is or how exactly you're going to reach that goal, I think moving forward, continuing to move forward is the best thing. And then eventually things just kind of reveal itself, you know, um, the path.
So
Does that make sense?
yeah, it actually it's interesting because you mentioned two different things there. One was a reflection on what you decided before, so the plan of action and all that. Um,
Hmm.
and then you said you don't have a problem with changing direction or shifting. So does that come when you're reflecting and you're like, oh, okay, so this was the plan before. I can't do it that way, so I need to do it a different way? Or is it this is what are the priorities as far as the shift? What do you consider, okay, I have to I have to change the way I was doing it to accomplish the ultimate goal? Or are you saying that the goal itself can shift over and change?
Both.
Okay.
The goal can change. Um, why not? Because if you get to a point and there's a roadblock. When you're making a plan, it's not like you're 100% certain that these are all the outside influences and risks and everything. There's no one can predict all those things
Right.
forever 100%, and so you're always going to run into something. And so why not change, um, and I think sometimes, I don't know, sometimes people, it freaks them out because then they're like, oh well, it's going to cost extra money and our delay and all that stuff, deadline. um, One thing I've learned is that everyone's flexible, everyone can be flexible on timelines. And so, um, it's important to negotiate that and then just make sure. I'm talking from a standpoint of being a product manager,
Right.
and you've got your stakeholders like the CEO, and I'm just thinking all the stakeholders, everyone is flexible. Everyone's flexible and can be. They don't want to be, but they can be. And as long as it's not crazy delay, right? You still have to kind of maintain some, you know, I guess reaching those high level goals and time frames. But if you need to recalibrate and delay just a little bit, I think it's, I mean, for me, it's okay. I'm fairly just, I'm super easygoing, and I'm like, okay, sure, let's just redo it as long as it gets done. You know, who cares?
I am looking back on different things when I've been the cause of the delay. I hate it and I despise it. I hate being the one to hold things up.
Mhm. Yeah.
On the other hand, um, as a stakeholder, I tend to be fairly understanding when there are delays because in fact, in the plan, subconsciously, when someone says, "Oh, it's going to be 6 weeks," I go, "Okay, so I'll plan on 9."
Yeah.
Do you have you ever worked with anyone who is consistent in hitting deadlines? Like I work with Sherry a lot.
No.
She constantly hits every deadline, and it's not frustrating. It's just maybe intimidating is a better word. She says, "Yeah, I should have that done by Wednesday," and then Tuesday night I get a, "Hey, it's done," and it's like, okay, that's good for you. She's awesome. But you haven't worked with someone who's consistently able to hit.
Um, and as
Yeah.
developers, no, I mean, I think most of like most from a development standpoint, most developers are pretty good at meeting their
Hmm.
deadlines. So I mean, yeah, a lot of people. I know, but I've also worked with developers that say, "Oh, it'll be this long," and then and then without a doubt, you just kind of have to say, "Okay, add 2 weeks."
Yeah.
You know,
I
and that's just I think the nature of the different uh, like teams. The team that was okay with always missing deadlines and adding two weeks.
mhm,
It was a um, it was a pretty laid back small team, and the deadlines that we had were our own deadlines, and so if we missed it, it wasn't
gotcha.
a problem.
Uh-huh.
Um, eventually we needed to kind of get better at that, but I think if he was in or these developers were in different scenarios, they could mix or make the deadlines, no problem.
That's cool. I
Yeah.
when you talk about teams, I get really excited. I've been part of some amazing teams. One of the teams I was part of, a guy named Matt Gregg. Well, it was with Matt, Greg, and Devin, and the four of us, we got so much done. And so we would set a 6 week sprint. Back then we didn't have the language that we have now, but we literally did a 6 week plan, and we would front load the first 2 weeks. And the four of us knew that the first 2 weeks were going to be horrible. We were going to be
Mhm.
working way more hours. We were going to be just spending all of our time trying to get most of the work done in the first 2 weeks. And we never missed a deadline, not once. And one time, I think Devin got sick or something, and it was the type of illness where he thought he could, he'd get better, and he figured, okay, I'll be able to jump in and I'll catch up, right? Because we worked ahead so much, he kept thinking he was going to be able to deliver. And I think we had a week left, and it was probably Matt, because he we used to call him cable Nazi because he wanted everybody to pull cable before they did software. He wanted them to be really familiar with the physical layer. But anyway, he said, "Yeah, he's not going to be able to finish. Let's the three of us take it on and do it." And we still hit the deadline. Um, that team was extraordinarily performant, and our cycle. I worked with them for about 2 years, and every 6 weeks we would get together, do a planning meeting. We knew what we needed to get done by the sixth week, and then the first 2 weeks we would just pound it and hit it, and then the last four we would meet and we'd discuss all the things that we didn't know was going to be a problem when we started, and then we would fit that into the schedule for the remaining four. And that seemed to work really well. I've worked with one other team that was performant like that. It was very rare. Almost everybody else seems to want to pace themselves, or they like to back end load it where they get behind and then they scramble and they use the deadline as a motivation to get stuff done.
Mm-hmm. That'd be like me.
Yeah.
Just procrastinating, like it's something I've always needed to work on. When I have a deadline, I seem to work just better. And I'm late, or I'm behind, or like it's close.
Mm-hmm.
I always try and get it done. Like, well, yeah, it just helps me work better.
That's probably why you put in those milestones, and you don't say, okay, we're going to have this massive project done by date, and you don't have any other milestones or smaller deadlines in the midst of it. Because I think that's the typical worker is they have so many priorities they're trying to balance that
Right.
urgent things, everything might be the same vitalness. It all has to be done, but the urgent is created with hey, this date, other people are counting on me.
Yeah. While you were talking earlier, I was thinking of just an example of a team that I was on. It was a really small team, and our CEO, it was small enough to where we would have daily stand-ups with the CEO, the whole everyone. And so he was really, really like heavily emphasized everyone having integrity, meaning, you our stand-ups would be like, okay, I'm going to accomplish this today, and what I'm working on, going to accomplish this today. Then the next day we would report, I got this done. I got this done. Or I didn't get this done, and here's why, and here's what I'm going to do. And I hated that starting out. I was like, I don't need to tell you. I'm just going to work, right? I hated it. But then I just slowly found the value of it, because when you commit to your team and other people, you say, I'm going to do this throughout your day. You're kind of, you're standing over yourself, and you're that constant badger, at least for me, that constant of, I've got to get this done, because I don't want to the next day face my team and say,
I didn't
I didn't get it done.
Yeah.
I went to say I had a great day, and this is what I got done. And I like that daily commitment affirmation from like getting that from teams.
I love daily stand-ups. I love the touch. I like the social aspect of saying hey to people and having a face and a personality to the name. I'm working with a developer right now. His name's Sunny, and we did some testing yesterday and found a weird bug. Okay, so we have a variable to decide what type of game is being created, and right now there's like 7 different modes. Okay, 1 through 7, and every time I was trying to test game creation for this particular game, it was failing, and the error was not helpful. So I got on a call with him, and he's showing me how to get more verbose error reporting. And as soon as I did that, I was like, thank you. Okay, I will take over from here, because I
Mhm.
assumed it was my end. I assumed that it was the back end. And so I'm in there and I'm looking at it, and I, took an hour to discover that he had hard coded a variable that was supposed to be 1 through 7. He had hard coded it to be 1.
Oh,
When you're trying to create that type of game, the system just goes, well, I don't know what to do with that.
right.
So anyway, I documented it, sent it to him, and I love his response. He goes, well, I see that. I need to figure out why I would have done that. Because he's like, that doesn't make sense to me. Why would I have hard coded that in my dev environment? What was it that I was trying to test that got stuck with? Anyway, he contacted me this morning. He's like, hey, any other tests, any other things that we need to um, work on today? And my
Mhm.
response was, I can't do more testing until you release your fix, because uh, I can't create a game, so I can't test a game.
Right.
But it's I love that daily contact. Uh, have you ever had what's if you shift development and product ownership into like your personal life? How do you handle it
Mhm.
with your spouse, with your siblings, or your parents, or your kids? How do you handle when you're trying to get stuff done and they're not you're not their so as a product owner, you do have some responsibility and authority to act, right? That's your job. As a
Yeah.
dad, you have some authority. As a spouse, there's a balance.
Hmm.
You got to be careful.
Yeah.
How do you do that in your family? Whether it's with your siblings, your parents, your kids, your spouse, how do you try and get things done, knowing that you have the skill set of a product owner, but you have to live in a world where you're not paying people and it hasn't been declared, hey, this is Mike, he's going to help us get this stuff done.
Um, like I think, like I mentioned before, I'm pretty easygoing,
Yeah.
and so I, I'm for me, if I have an idea and I'm like, okay, this is how it should be accomplished, um, and then someone else is like trying to do something else, or my wife or siblings, like, okay, let's do this. Um, I mean, I will voice my opinion, but ultimately, I'm like, I don't care. Fine, let's just do it this way. So I'm pretty flexible. One thing, so my last name's Fleming, and one thing we the Flemings always say is the fun, flexible Flemings.
Ah,
We are flexible, and we will literally roll with anything. My wife can't; she doesn't understand, but we could, if we're meeting a family or someone new, they like are best friends to us instantly. We embrace them and like whatever, and we can show up to someone's house, a stranger's house, and just stay the night and not it doesn't bother us.
wow.
We let someone stay with us. So we're like my wife says that's weird and that's not common, and I'm like, I don't. What are you talking about?
What are the good things that come from that?
What?
What are the good things that come from being that flexible?
You don't worry about anything.
Okay.
I don't stress. I mean, we're like I'm going through some stressful trials and stuff in life right now.
Hmm.
Just you know, last couple of years have been tough because jobs and health issues and stuff like that, and they've been stressful. But eventually, as you kind of work through it and just time goes on, I I always go back to zero and just not stress.
That's cool. What's the downside?
Um, it makes it easy to just kind of not progress.
Mm,
You just kind of go back into your normal routine.
yeah.
And so sometimes those trials and struggles in life are there to force you to change things and improve yourself. And if you're not, you're just like, oh, I'll just adapt, you kind of just go back into your normal routine and may not progress enough.
That's I have this belief, and I don't know if it's true, um, but the belief is that every virtue, if taken to an extreme, becomes a vice. And I know that's not true. So I guess I should say I have a belief that's not true because I have a thing that makes it not true. Compassion. I haven't figured out
Mm-hmm.
how compassion taken to an extreme is a vice. But everything else that's a virtue taken to an extreme, I can see how it can become a vice, whether that's kindness to others, where that's a good thing to be kind to others, but taken to an extreme, you prioritize kindness over other things that are more important and that sort of thing. So, um,
Like what?
okay, so I'm very kind in um, in how I help deal with situations. I'm very kind. If sometimes though I have to say no, that's wrong, and it's morally wrong.
Mm.
And the kind part of me wants to just say, okay, well, to each their own. I love you. You're gonna be fine. It's gonna be awesome. And I had a family member who was making some decisions that were horrible. And the kind part of me wanted to be friendly and nice and say, oh, yeah, hey, good for you. But in reality, it wasn't good for her and it was going to have dire consequences. And so I had to not have kindness be the virtue, the ultimate virtue there, and have moral correctness be. And so, the kindest way I could, I told her, "Hey, I'm gonna share this with you, because somebody needs to. Making those choices are
Mm-hmm.
wrong. It's wrong to make those choices, and the consequences are going to be horrible." Now, fast forward, she continued down those roads and she was in jail multiple times, then went to prison, and she's now out. And she is really striving to not make the same decisions that she made in the past that led to her incarceration and her addictions.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, I wanted to be just kind and supportive, but I had to actually speak. I had to be truth. So I had to be honest, which was more important than kindness. And then on the other hand, you have honesty, which is a good virtue, but taken to an extreme can be, um,
You have to be diplomatic.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, if your spouse asks you, "Oh, how's this outfit look?" Too late.
Awesome.
You lost it already. But
So that's funny. I was just thinking that example you gave. So someone I know is in AA,
uh-huh.
and um, and I have talked to this person a bunch about the exam with like the scenarios and everything, and just in that example to me, because I've learned so much from this person that um, this doesn't really add to it, but I just was thinking about it. Those type of people. So you were being nice,
Hmm.
and ultimately that's the only thing you could do, because that person was not going to change until they hit their own rock bottom, right?
Yeah.
they had to do it. They had to hit rock bottom. I have someone, uh, I have someone that's the same thing, and we're, family and everything. We're always trying to get this person to change,
Mm-hmm.
and they just keep falling into the same mistakes over and over and over again for years, and you're just like, and you just talk to this person until you're blue in the face. At this point, though, it's just that they have to hit their own threshold
Mm-hmm.
of, oh wow, I've screwed things up. I need to change. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. So it's interesting because when I was talking to her about the decision she was making, she was at a crossroads. She was not addicted. She was not, um, she was,
Oh,
so it was early in the journey. Post that,
oh
once
yeah.
she got into all the things she got into and she became addicted. I'm a big
Mhm.
fan of 12-step programs. I get to participate with family members and different neighbors who I've gone to different meetings, and I myself think everybody should go sometimes because it's so helpful to acknowledge your own weakness and try and make
Mhm.
amends and inventory your life. There's so many wonderful things in 12-step programs that I think are so beneficial. But when this was when she was a teenager, and um, the little things that she was doing were not devastating to her life. It wasn't like,
Yeah.
oh, should I do drugs? It was, well, I don't think there's anything wrong with watching these type of movies. And I said at the time, I was like, well, I'm much older than you, and I don't know why there's a rating for that versus this. And she, as a young teenager, said, oh, well, because of this, this, and this, it makes it this classification. And because of this, it's this classification. And I was appalled. I was like, okay, well, how do you know that? And, as she's choosing to, the intake of media that she was choosing was pretty awful. And then
Mhm.
that it took her down a path. And yes, that's like saying everybody who does heroin started off drinking milk. Yes, I get that. That's not what I'm saying. Um,
Yeah.
but she was thinking and she was discussing purposefully choosing a different standard. And she was
Right.
purposely at a young age deciding that she wasn't going to follow the standards as presented to her by those around her. And at the time, her parents were, um, I'm going to say, recently divorced,
Mhm.
and neither one, uh, they were, I think it was very difficult for them to have moral standards with their kids because of uh, the natural man, the natural tendency of a child to work one parent against the other when they're not united. And it
Mhm.
was just such a horrible, awful situation for her. And she was just using it to say, well, I get to choose what I want. And they're not going to say anything because they can't, because I can just go to the other person's house and I can abuse the freedom that I have because they're not united. So
Yeah, that makes.
anyway, all of there's a lot of context there, but you're right. When someone is in, when they haven't hit rock bottom, sometimes you can't help them, but you can be there for them. And that kindness virtue, that's where it comes to fruition, right? And you don't have to constantly beat them over the head with honesty saying, well, you're making awful decisions. Well, sometimes the compulsions are what they are, and you got to have some grace and some compassion for them and let them come to decisions on their own because that's your role, that's your stewardship. So,
Mhm. Mhm. Hey, so I have a kind of a question to elaborate more on this, and we can talk religion and politics.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so it made me think of these articles that I've seen. So the LDS people in Utah, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, um, the politics in Utah are becoming very liberal.
Mhm.
Are liberal,
Yeah.
not becoming. They are very liberal, very left wing. You know, bad, evil stuff. And so, um, the the people in Utah are, Mormons or LDS people are normally, they're very nice, right? We're considered very nice people.
Yeah. That's a
Too
stereotype
nice
that
to,
seems to be true. Yeah.
right, right. So too nice to the point where they've allowed this wickedness to infiltrate their politics.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And I've seen stuff where, there's I don't know if this is really that. There was somebody posted a picture of somebody, it was in the Relief Society room, and it was a group of Muslims praying in the Relief Society room, and they had, in the background, they had covered the picture of Jesus.
Oh,
And this person was like, "This is not right. We need to be mean. We need to be more aggressive." And I don't know. I just thought, I was wondering what your take is on that, and if in fact, because you have the title of liberty,
mm-hmm.
Moroni, and there's that
Yeah.
example, and that was pretty extreme. Um,
Well, when you say
at what point?
extreme, it was a targeted. It was targeted to war, right? To
Yeah,
they weren't, and they were in defense of their thing. So yes, but it was an extreme. I'm not moving. This is the line. No more. You guys, you live in your lands. We wouldn't fight you if you guys wouldn't attack us, right? It was that attitude.
who does that sound like
Yeah, it does.
in today's right now? Um, well, so that, anyways, that just, I've thought about that. Do is there going to be a point where members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are going to have to become more aggressive?
So recently, in I was talking to a coworker. He's awesome, and we were talking about assertiveness, aggression, and passive. And I think what you're describing is members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter Day Saints think that being loving and being kind and being Christ-like is to be passive. And then those who are on on the other side of that passive, instead of being they think that the opposite of passive is aggressive, and so they're almost attacking, and it doesn't feel Christ-like. It doesn't feel the way that our Savior would behave in what they're trying to prevent from occurring. They're trying to defend
Mhm.
what's right. And I think what the problem is instead of being passive, or instead of being the opposite of passive, being assertive, they are taking the opposite of passive as aggressive. And so with with that distinction between aggression and assertiveness, you can stand your ground and be very assertive without.
But be compassionate about it.
What was that?
But be compassionate about it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And in so my belief is in our the number so here's my hierarchy of priorities when it comes to religion is number one, everybody gets to choose from themselves for themselves, including my kids. My kids are taught my spiritual belief structure. They're taught that they will get to choose whether or not they're going to do something different in the future. That's number one. While they're in my
Mhm.
home, I'm going to teach them everything I know for their good. I've had, I have 8 kids, and I've had more than two come to me and say, "Hey, I don't know if I'm going to follow your belief structure." And I'm like, "Okay, well, let's talk about it, and let's figure things out." Because the way that we can tell, even if, let's just pretend that God doesn't exist in the way that we view him, and that Jesus Christ didn't die for you to make you whole again. Let's just
Hmm.
pretend that that happened. What are the consequences of living a life trying to emulate Jesus Christ if he didn't exist? And the consequences of living that life is a joyful, faith, enduring life. And what are the consequences of living a different way? Well, the principles are going to work no matter what. So I've had these discussions. My kids know that I'm going to maintain a relationship with them. And I, as their dad, my job is to help them deal with the consequences of their decisions. And I'm going to be there to help them deal with those consequences. But I'm not going to say, well, I'm going to help you kill puppies because that's what you've chosen to do. I'm going to help you deal with the consequences that you've been killing puppies. I think killing puppies is wrong. So I will deal with the consequences of that while not embracing the action. So I imagine there will be a shift where we'll become more assertive. And I've seen this across the pulpit when laws have been proposed to hinder the freedom of religion. And the
Yeah.
church has been assertive in its declaration of, this is important that we protect other people's rights to choose what religion how they practice religion, and it's important for us. So they're assertive, but they're not aggressive. They don't start having people show up and chant, down with Prop, 285, down.
Right.
It's not aggressive. It's assertive, and it's the humble. Um, it's a humble meekness that allows us to inherit the earth. It's not no action. It's just a meekness.
Yeah, and my concern is that the the wickedness will see that as weakness and attempt to, I guess, no matter what, they're going to fight back. Even if you're aggressive or meek, the outcome from the left or from the wickedness is still, wicked people are still going to be the same.
Yeah, and I have some real tender things in my family where I have relatives who are making choices that go against the standards that I believe in. I love them, and I associate with them, and in fact, I enjoy them. I enjoy being with them. What
Hmm.
makes it difficult is, at some point, some of them. So this is about trans and same gender attraction and the
Yeah.
LGBTQ community. And I know I missed some
Right.
initials, and I apologize, but
Don't,
they well, I apologize to them because that's the world they live in, right?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I love them, and I enjoy them, and I hang out with them, but some have chosen to take a stand that says, if you're not promoting my lifestyle, you're against me.
Yeah.
And that is such a sad state, because I won't promote. I will love, and I'll defend their rights, but not because of a special, because they happen to be X, Y, or Z. I want the same rights for them that everybody else has. And that's where I have to draw the line. And unfortunately, I think they have felt that in my non participation in their social media posts, and in their desire to get change to happen in the structures, that in the organizations they belong to. I mean, we were all raised in the same organization as far as the Church of
Mhm.
Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints go. And my stance is that I must, if I disagree with the something that's coming from God, because I believe that God talks to his prophets today and then they talk to us. It's the pattern that's been followed for millennia. I choose to believe that I must not understand something, and so I'm patiently waiting for understanding while I follow that dictate. And it, they want the church to change, and it's like, well, take it to a higher level.
Mhm.
Take it to someone else. If you disagree, take it higher. And in fact, you know what? I'm going to share this with you. It's kind of fun. I had a relative who there was in our family. This was a while ago. There was a uh, there was some disagreements about whether or not marriages were valid because the person performing the marriage did not have authority or authorization, I should say. They didn't have authorization from the church to perform the marriage. And so,
But were they legally from the government standpoint?
from the church's standpoint, and so inside of the, so here's the situation: proclamation to the world, the manifesto on plural marriage no longer allowed. Okay, after that occurred, marriages continued to happen within the church.
Oh yeah.
So it took some time for everybody to get behind the official stance, right? So there's a segment of the
Those marriages wouldn't be valid.
correct. You would think so, right? So what if they were performed by an apostle?
So, right?
Right. Well, that's the contention. Okay. So the
Well, let me ask you, what did you, if the prophet says these are no longer, this is no longer a thing,
mhm.
the church does not do this anymore. This is God said no more. But then an apostle goes and goes against
And
that.
does it? Yeah.
That like him going against what God has said totally invalidates his keys and priesthood, doesn't it?
Well, then how did Alma have the priesthood? Where did he get it?
Alma the
Older. Oh
younger,
no.
older.
If there were a bunch of
I don't
unrighteous
know.
priests, where did he get the priesthood to go baptize?
I don't know.
Yeah. So authorization is different than authority. Power is different than authority. So
They had they had the authority, but were not authorized.
correct.
What you're
That's
saying,
what I'm saying.
right? So that's what I'm saying. It isn't in the Doctrine and Covenants where it talks about, amen to
Man,
that
and
man's
priesthood.
priesthood,
Right. Speaking specifically of unrighteous dominion.
right?
Now, here's the problem. The reason I can't give you what I think is because my answer comes from this letter
What
that
letter?
I'm about to read to you from a
And where is this
this
letter?
letter was written to my relative by her priesthood leader. Okay.
Uh, is this a ancestor?
Yeah, just this is just an ancestor and we have it in our family history.
Okay.
Okay, so this is definitely not church doctrine, but this letter speaks so clearly to my soul that I say amen. Hallelujah. That is exactly right. When I don't
Okay.
understand. So here's the letter. It
Okay.
says, Dear Sister Priest, your letter of March 7th has been given careful and prayerful consideration, in which you ask that certain marriages of women to your father be ratified, which purported marriages is claimed were performed by so and so after President Woodruff issued the manifesto. Okay.
Okay.
According to family group sheets, which you've submitted, these, and he lists a bunch of details. I'm going to skip down, and then
So hold on. So your relative is asking the church to validate these marriages.
correct,
Okay.
and she's going up the the normal chain, right?
Right. Okay.
And then it's in view, and this is the part that I love and I adore, and I adopt it anytime I disagree or don't understand. In view of all the facts pertaining to this situation, it has been decided that this is a matter that we must leave to the decision of the Lord in the hereafter, knowing as we do that his decision will be right and just. Accordingly, I'm returning all the documentation you submit.
Hmm.
I feel assured that upon careful and prayerful reflection, you will be able to reconcile your feelings to the wisdom of this decision. Now, so if she still disagreed, what is her proper response? What should she do next if she still disagrees with that decision?
Well, I would tell her you just need to pray for patience and wait till you're there for the Lord to decide.
Yeah, that
You're, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
I agree. I completely agree. And so that's my stance with my family on who are like, well, the church needs to do different. They need to be different in this manner. And I'm like, well, that's not for I mean, take it to a higher authority, right? Take it to your bishop. Your bishop that can't help you. Take it to the stake president. Stake president can't help you. Who do you take it to? Right?
Right. The authority, apostle,
Yeah.
prophet.
And they're going to refer you back to your the priesthood leader who is over the spiritual things, who has the keys of spiritual things, which is your stake president. But this priesthood leader, sincerely, your brother, David O. McKay.
Number 9.
That's right. So who do you talk to above him? You do. You talk to God.
Yeah.
And you pray and you request and you bug the Lord to reconcile your feelings with the decision, or for the patience to wait for the things to change, because in the hereafter, that's the whole point of having a Lord and Savior who makes us whole. It's not just for sin, that's part of it. Yeah, we're all fallen, but it's also to help us deal with the fact that mortality is a state where perfection is not possible. And thus, others will injure and hurt us. So, if we are going to rely upon Christ's merits to make us whole, it needs to be both for our own sins and our own decisions and our own omissions, as well as
Mm-hmm.
the sins, omissions, and of other people, and the fact that we're in mortality. So that's when someone wants the church to change, take it to a higher authority and stop bugging the local leaders, because they're going to do what's right from where they stand. And if you get them to change, it's not going to change God's perspective. You need to change your perspective, or wait for God to issue from higher up how it's going to be.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think kind of talking back to that person, that the people, because I've had friends at work and stuff that have claimed that have left the church, and it's because the church has morally has changed.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. And you're like, no,
Yeah.
no, they haven't changed. You've changed. And I think for someone to say, why can't the church change? Why can't the church change? I think to them, you need to ask them of, do you do you believe in what the church teaches? Right? So they want the church to change without the commitment to the church.
Yeah.
And ultimately it's like, why do you care?
Yeah.
If you're not willing to live what's been laid out in gospel scriptures, if you're not willing to follow that, then you have no stake in this. Why do you
Yeah.
care what the church thinks about you? Why do you care?
Yep. And yet they
And
get so
that's the thing is that,
passionate.
yeah.
And
Um,
I have a hard time reconciling this piece. I don't believe the church is true, because true meaning solid, correct, and whole. Okay, true as in not actual factual, but true as in a true member, a dam that is true, is solid, right? Uh,
mhm.
if they don't believe the church is true, then why do they want? The, why do they spend so much of their energy pushing against something they don't believe is true, solid,
Exactly.
and it's because, and for I've as I've thought about this, it's because they want it to be true. They want to belong to
Absolutely.
something that is whole and accurate, etc. But the problem is they're starting from a position that will never allow them to experience that peace that comes with faith in the hereafter, faith in the ability to change. The church, the church as a structure has changed, and it constantly changes. The structure changes all the time. I mean, elders quorum doesn't the high priest group and elders quorum in an organization is totally different than it was just 10 years ago.
Yeah.
The structure is constantly changing. The
Right.
doctrine doesn't change.
Hmm.
The administration of the church changes all the time. Wait, be patient. You can't lobby this from below. And if you want to have an influence on others, do it with a Christ-like attitude. He was submissive as and meek as he asserted the truth.
Right. What's interesting is that even if the church changed their stance, it would still not be
Yeah,
enough. It would leave that person empty
yeah,
still.
I agree.
They'd move on to something else. It's never enough. And it's like that, not comparing them to anything like that. But I think of the evil spirits and how
They got cast out and
they
went
were,
into the swine.
yeah, and that was like the best thing
Yeah,
for them, right? It's it's never enough.
yeah, and that's I've been so amazed by some of my relatives who are wrestling with the Lord,
Hmm.
and we have the discussions in our family. They are contemplative, they think, they're trying to figure things out, like we all have to. And I'm amazed at some of their diligence, even as they separate themselves from the practices of the church, because they no longer live the lifestyle that allows them to be in good standing.
Hmm.
They What's amazing is some of them don't try to fight against the church, and I didn't think that was possible. um,
They don't try
they
to.
they have not started to fight against the church. um, and I thought for the longest time that they it was going to happen. In my mind, I think it was, oh, you can go you can if you go into inactivity, that's something that happens. But if you
Mhm.
disagree with a fundamental, you have that causes you gives you the reasons to leave, that you would then fight against it. and that hasn't been the case.
Right. Well, that's
And I'm
interesting.
I'm
Most
so
people do,
grateful
right?
that that's, that there are members who have used to be members and have left the church because they disagree with the practices and they don't want to live a life that, for them, they're choosing a different path and they're
Hmm.
not fighting. And I just respect that so much because they've chosen to leave. So why continue to fight it? It
Yeah, which that's pretty rare, I think,
I
though.
agree.
Rare. Most people can't leave it alone.
When
And I think there's an interesting talk by President or Elder Maxwell.
yeah,
He was
it,
epic in his
yeah,
talks.
he would say 3 words and okay, I need to think about that for a couple decades.
Right.
That guy, whew.
Right. Yeah. I think he gave a talk about how, you know, people leave the church, but they can never leave it alone.
So that's okay. So there's a gradient, obviously, because people who have just gone inactive. They're not they
Yeah.
leave the church alone.
Uh, yeah. Yeah, they do. And what's funny though is that they can't leave it alone. I know of a specific family that we were we were over at their house and they said that um, we're leaving the church. It was a big shock, but um, they still do basketball. They still do activities.
Hmm.
And so
So perhaps there's a difference as well, because inactivity, but keeping your names on the rolls of the church,
mhm.
um, that connection, that makes sense. Because we're all on a different. We're all trying to return to God in theory, right? That's what the theory is. Everybody wants to return to God. The reality is we are all on different parts of that path of that headed back to God, and we find ourselves in different places. For a long time I was inactive. I didn't engage. If the
You were
Was that?
you
Yeah.
were
So for a couple years, when my daughter Mary was born, so this was
really
22 years ago. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, most people don't realize that. Um, the Yeah, and I guess for me, because I was inactive and I did not engage in the church for I mean, it wasn't a few weeks, it wasn't a few months, it was a few years.
Okay.
And I, I didn't fight against the church. I just tried to not do anything
Yeah.
related. And I, as I started trying, we talk about hitting bottom. I didn't ever hit bottom. My life was still pretty good. But I missed the spiritual aspect of things, and so I the guy who his name is Scott, and I won't use his last name because he's a dentist here in my valley, but he was my home teaching companion, and he was assigned basically all part member families, and we were assigned together, and he would call me up. I I didn't go to church, but he would call me up and say, "Hey, Cameron, Scott here, gonna go to visit this family and this family today. Can I come by and pick you up?" And I'd be like, uh, "Okay." And we'd go and we'd have this great, wonderful discussion, and I'd feel uplifted and I'd feel good, and I'd go home and then I'd go back to my inactivity, and I would be like, I think I used to feel that way a lot more. And so Scott, through and when I'd tell him no, he'd be like, "Okay, I'll call you next time."
Right.
And I'd be like, "Okay, whatever." So
Take your hand.
yeah, and so over the course of 6, 7 months, I started participating with him. And then I started teaching the gospel principles class. And then I was like, I want to be more spiritual. So we moved out of that ward, moved to a different ward. And I was like, I want to be more spiritual. I want to have what I used to feel. I want that all the time. And I started going to church, bare minimum. And this guy named Jeff, his last name's Wilcox, Jeff Wilcox. I will use his name because, he's not a dentist or a doctor or somewhere, where, but he taught an elders quorum lesson, and he talked about sins of omission, sins of commission. And he said, most of us here, we have a few sins of commission that we need to work on, but the majority of our issues have to do with sins of omission. That which we should do that we don't do, versus things that we shouldn't do and do. And he said, I challenge you to start to engage and say yes to all the invitations that have to do with with good things in the church. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to do that. And so I would ask to do something. I would say yes. And then I'd go and do it. I'd ask to be something else. Yes. And then I became more spiritual, started to be mindful of God, not prayerful, but mindful. And my life progressively got better and better. So much so that, a couple moves later, when I tell someone, oh yeah, I used to be inactive, that, they're, oh, what? We're like, oh yeah. So I'm fine with people who are at a different path, because I used to be that guy who didn't engage, who wouldn't go do anything. So but I never fought against it. So
right. Well, that's interesting. How much time do we have?
We're probably at time, but what do you got?
So I don't know if this person will see this podcast or not. I have a really close acquaintance friend, really good friend, and we were over at their house, and right before we left, he said, I've left the church, and not just recently. It's been like 10 years.
Oh wow!
And I was like, what? And you're the one that got me converted. Like you were the prime example, and it's pretty wild to me to think that this person, and he doesn't fight. His wife is still active, and he doesn't fight against it. But he's taken this stance of stoicism, which is Marcus Aurelius was kind of their biggest advocate. Stoicism is basically living a life of virtue, which is strange to me. I'm curious to see how that person got to that point.
Yeah,
because you're basically living it. So what was it? He just doesn't believe in God.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't just leave the church. It's because he doesn't believe in God.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is wild to me. I can't imagine ever thinking that way. I've been through a lot of stuff, and to me, it's like, if you don't believe in that, what's the point?
Yeah.
What's the point in continuing on with any sort of responsibility? Right? So,
well, I've actually done the mental exercises because I questioned whether God existed too.
Yeah.
So, you can still have joy. You can still have moments of joy and happiness and pleasure in mortality. It's not as if not believing in God.
Well, I'm not saying you can't, right? You can't, yeah.
But you said,
but you have to ask yourself, where does that come from?
That's the thing. There's a law irrevocably decreed that every blessing is tied to a principle of obedience, something like that, right? There's a scripture, and that is true whether or not you believe in the law. It's not it doesn't require belief to get the effect.
Right. It's people who believe that the earth is flat. They can believe that all they want, but that doesn't make it so.
Oh yeah, we could talk for ages on that. Have we talked about flat Earth?
No, I would love to talk more about that though, because that fascinates me that people get to the point.
Okay, next time let's talk about the what is required to become a flat earther and how we who believe the earth is round, globalists or spherists, whatever they call it,
Roundus,
roundists,
roundies.
roundies, I like that one. How sometimes we are furthers in different ways, right? We believe things that are not true, but it's because we're relying upon something.
Oh yeah,
So,
I'd be curious. That'd be interesting.
okay, I'm going to ask Elizabeth to set up another one of these.
All right.
Super. Thanks, Mike. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, dude. Thanks. Bye.